Hello guys, this is your friend Multiverse Shinobi 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto was raised by Madara? Part 1. The Shadow of the Ghost. The night the Nine Tails attacked Konoha was not defined by the roaring of the beast, but by the suffocating scent of ash and blood. Deep within the trenches of the battlefield, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, drew his final breath. He died believing he had secured the future of the Leaf Village by sealing the yin half of the Kyuubi inside his newborn son, Naruto. He believed the village would see his son as a hero. He was wrong. As the smoke cleared and the full moon pierced through the smog of Konoha, a silent figure stood atop the Hokage monument. He wore a battle-torn, crimson samurai armor over black robes, his long, spiky black hair cascading down his back like a dark waterfall. His eyes burned with the crimson glow of the three-tomo Sharingan, spinning slowly before shifting into the intricate, geometric pattern of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Madara Uchiha. He was supposed to be a ghost. A myth used to scare children in the academy. Yet, here he stood, looking down at the burning village with cold contempt. He hadn't orchestrated this specific attack. That had been the work of Obito, his foolish, self-proclaimed successor. But Madara was an opportunist. He had sensed the massive displacement of chakra, the shattering of Hashirama's beloved village, and he had come to watch the ashes fall. Then, a faint, fragile cry echoed through the desolate forest just outside the village perimeter. Madara turned his gaze toward the source. With a single, silent flicker, shunshin, he vanished. The altar of fate. In a clearing littered with the shattered remains of the sealing ritual, a tiny wicker basket sat on the cold, damp earth. Inside lay a newborn infant with spiky blonde hair and strange, whisker-like marks on his cheeks. The boy was crying, his small fists flailing against the cold night air. Dark, malicious red chakra seeped from his navel, staining his blanket. Madara stepped out of the shadows, his heavy boots crunching softly against the gravel. He looked down at the child. So, this is the vessel, Madara mused, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that carried the weight of a century of warfare. The fourth Hokage sacrificed his soul to turn his own flesh and blood into a weapon. Hypocrisy. The true foundation of Konoha. Madara knelt down, extending a gloved hand toward the infant. The moment his fingers neared the child, the residual Kyuubi chakra flared up aggressively, burning like AC. Trying to repel the intruder. Madara's eyes narrowed. His eternal Mangekyo flashed dangerously. Know your place, beast, Madara whispered. An overwhelming wave of conqueror's intent and suffocating chakra blasted from Madara's body. The air pressure in the clearing dropped instantly. The Kyuubi's chakra hissed, recoiling in absolute terror as it recognized the psychic signature of the one man who had truly enslaved it decades ago. The red chakra violently retreated back into the seal, leaving the baby shivering and silent. Naruto opened his eyes. They were a piercing, crystalline blue. He did not cry at the sight of the terrifying warrior looming over him. Instead, the infant blinked, reached up, and grabbed Madara's gloved index finger with his tiny hand. Madara froze. For the first time in decades, a genuine smirk played on the legendary Uchiha's lips. He sensed the boy's chakra coils. They were massive, a raging ocean of potential inherited from the Uzumaki lineage, compounded by the volatile power of the beast inside him. You do not fear the dark, Madara murmured, gently lifting the basket with one arm. Hashirama believed that love and peace would foster the next generation. Look where that got his village. I will teach you a different truth, child. I will teach you that power is the only absolute reality. Before the Konoha Anbu or the grieving third Hokage could scout the perimeter, the ghost of the Uchiha vanished into the night, taking the village's ultimate weapon with him. The graveyard of the past. Deep within the mountains of the graveyard, inside a subterranean cavern illuminated only by eerie, glowing moss and the grotesque, organic roots of the Gedo Mazo, demonic statue of the outer path, Naruto found his new home. This was not a place for a child. There were no toys, no warmth, and no smiles. There were only white, featureless Zetsu clones moving like puppets through the dark, and an ancient, dying god tethered to a tree of chakra. By the time Naruto was 4 years old, he knew no mother, no father, and no friends. He only knew the man he called Sensei. Why do the villagers in your stories hate the dark, Lord Madara? A young, 4-year-old Naruto asked one evening. He was sitting cross-legged on the cold stone floor, sharpening a kunai with remarkable precision for his age. His blonde hair was longer now, shaggy, and hung slightly over his sharp blue eyes. He wore a simple, high-collared black robe, devoid of any village crest. Madara, sitting upon his stone throne, connected to the Gedo Mazo by thick white tubes supplying him with life force, looked down at the boy. Because they are weak, Naruto, Madara replied coldly. The weak fear what they cannot control, and they hate what they cannot understand. They hide in the light of their illusions, calling it peace. But peace without power is a lie. It is a temporary pause between slaughters. Naruto nodded solemnly. He didn't fully understand the philosophy yet, but he understood the discipline. In this cave, crying was met with isolation. Weakness was met with harsher training. Tomorrow, your true conditioning begins, Madara stated, his Sharingan glowing faintly in the dim light. The Uzumaki blood in your veins makes your body resilient, and the fox's chakra will heal you. You will endure training that would kill an ordinary child tenfold. Do you accept this? Naruto stood up, slipping his kunai into his holster. His face, completely devoid of the typical innocence of a 4-year-old, hardened. I accept, Sensei. Make me strong. The Crucible. The next 3 years were a living hell. Madara did not train Naruto to be a ninja, he trained him to be a force of nature. While children in Konoha were learning to throw shuriken and play tag, Naruto was being hunted by white Zetsu clones through Tr. Ichirus, trap-laden canyons in the dead of night. If Naruto failed to dodge, he was impaled. If he hesitated, he went hungry. By age 7, Naruto's physical conditioning was monstrous. Thanks to the Kyuubi's passive regeneration and Madara's brutal, unforgiving regime, Naruto's reflexes, speed, and taijutsu were already at a high Chunin level. But Madara wasn't satisfied with physical prowess alone. Chakra is not just energy. Naruto, Madara lectured one day as they stood in a massive underground cavern with a subterranean lake. It is the spiritual and physical alignment of your very existence. Your chakra is chaotic. It is fighting against the beast inside you. How do I fix it? Naruto asked, breathing heavily, covered in bruises and dirt. You do not suppress the beast. You dominate it, Madara commanded. Sit. Naruto crossed his legs and closed his eyes, diving deep into his own subconscious. In the dark, damp sewer of his mind, Naruto stood before a colossal iron cage secured by a paper seal. Behind the bars, 2 massive, slitted crimson eyes snapped open. The 9 tails loomed, bearing its colossal fangs, releasing a wave of red, burning chakra that threatened to drown Naruto's mental avatar. Mortal brat. The Kyuubi roared, its voice shaking Naruto's psyche. I will tear you apart. Let me out. Naruto did not flinch. He stood perfectly still, his blue eyes cold and unyielding. He remembered Madara's teachings. Fear is an illusion born of weakness. Shut up, Naruto said, his voice echoing with an eerie, quiet authority. The Kyuubi paused, genuinely surprised by the lack of terror in the child. What did you say, worm? Exclamation mark quote. I said, shut up, Naruto repeated, stepping closer to the cage. You think you are a god. You are nothing but a mass of chakra, trapped in a cage, mastered by a dying man outside. You will not consume me. You will give me your power, or I will take it by force. The Kyuubi snarled, realizing that the child's demeanor was terrifyingly identical to the man who had enslaved it decades ago. The boy didn't have the Sharingan, but he had the will of Madara Uchiha. Outside, in the real world, Madara watched as a dense, controlled cloak of red chakra enveloped Naruto. But it wasn't burning his skin. It wasn't driving him insane. Naruto was forcing the chakra to conform to his own physical energy. When Naruto opened his eyes, they were still blue, but a sharp, slit pupil crossed through them. He extended his hand toward the subterranean lake. Futon. Atsugai. Wind style. Pressure damage. Naruto roared. A localized, violent hurricane exploded from his palm, ripping through the cavern, tearing the subterranean lake apart and blasting a massive crater into the stone wall opposite him. The sheer concussive force shook the entire mountain range. Naruto panted, the red cloak fading back into his body. He looked at his hands, then up at his master. Madara stood up from his throne, a rare, terrifyingly proud expression on his face. Excellent, Madara said, his voice echoing in the ruined cavern. You possess the Uzumaki's vitality, the Kyuubi's destructive force, and my tactical mind. The Leaf Village thinks they are safe behind their walls. They think they have forgotten the name of Madara Uchiha. Quote. Madara walked down the steps, stopping right in front of the 7-year-old prodigy. Soon, Naruto. Soon, we will show them that the shadow they cast out has returned to swallow them whole. The crimson graduation. The air inside the mountains of the graveyard grew colder with each passing year, matching the hardening of Naruto's soul. By the age of 11, Naruto no longer looked like any child from Konoha. His blonde hair had grown longer, framing his sharp, expressionless face, and his piercing blue eyes he held the calculating stillness of a predator. He wore dark, combat-fitted robes strapped with light armor plates, a silent homage to the ancient warrior who sat upon the stone throne. Madara was dying. The Geto Mazo could only sustain his ancient body for so long. His breathing was shallow, a raspy wheeze that echoed through the dark cavern, but his mind remained as sharp and terrifying as a razor. Bring me the blade, Naruto. Madara's voice echoed weakly, yet commanded absolute obedience. Naruto stepped forward, carrying a wrapped, heavy weapon. He unwrapped it to reveal a legendary relic of the Warring States era. Madara's massive, dual-bladed gunbai war fan, forged from the wood of a sacred spirit tree, capable of absorbing and redirecting catastrophic attacks. You have mastered the physical forms, and your control over the fox's chakra is absolute, Madara murmured, his lone Sharingan gleaming in the dark. But a weapon is only as good as the hand that wields it. Today is your final trial. Today, you graduate from my shadow. From the darkness behind Naruto, the earth began to churn. White Zetsu clones, not dozens, but hundreds, began to rise from the floor and walls, their twisted, pale bodies filling the cavern. Their yellow eyes locked onto the young boy. Kill them all, Madara commanded flatly. If a single one breathes by sunrise, you die in this cave. The dance of death. Naruto didn't hesitate. He grabbed the heavy chain of the gunbai, spinning the massive weapon effortlessly despite his youth. A dozen Zetsu clones lunged at him simultaneously, their arms morphing into sharp wooden spikes. Naruto leapt into the air, twisting his body with violent grace. Uchiha Genjutsu. Utakata. Naruto didn't possess the Sharingan, but under Madara's strict tutelage, he had learned how to channel his SSIVE chakra through subtle hand signs to cast terrifying sensory illusions. The front line of Zetsus froze, trapped in a nightmare of burning ash. Before they could break free, Naruto slammed the gunbai into the ground. Futon. Daitapa. Wind style. Great breakthrough. A violent, concentrated gale exploded from the fan, shattering the frozen clones into pieces and blasting a massive pathway through the horde. Naruto charged into the gap, his speed enhanced by a subtle leak of the Kyuubi's red chakra. He became a blur of black and crimson. He didn't fight with the noisy, chaotic energy of a child trying to prove himself. He fought like Madara. Every movement was calculated, every strike was lethal. A kunai to the throat, a precise chakra-infused palm strike to shatter a core, a sweeping kick to BR. EAK a frontline. Hours blurred into a relentless rhythm of bloodless, pale limbs being torn apart. Naruto's hands were stained with the sticky, sap-like fluid of the Zetsus, his breathing heavy, but his eyes never lost their icy focus. When the last Zetsu fell, its head severed by Naruto's bare hand infused with wind chakra, the first rays of the morning sun pierced through a small crack in the cavern ceiling. Naruto stood amidst a mountain of pale corpses, panting heavily, holding the gunbai at his side. He looked up at the throne. Madara chuckled. A low, dark sound of profound satisfaction. Superb. You do not dance with the clumsy steps of Hashirama's shinobi. You dance with the precision of an Uchiha. Quote. The inheritance of the ghost. Madara leaned back against the Gedo Mazo, his single eye beginning to lose its luster. The time had come. Listen closely. Naruto. Madara whispered, his voice fading but heavy with gravity. The world thinks I am dead, and soon, my physical body will be. But my will lives on. Obito is currently moving the Akatsuki pieces from the shadows, playing his part in the Eye of the Moon plan. But he is a compromised fool, driven by cheap emotion. You are my true legacy. Madara gestured for Naruto to come closer. Naruto knelt beside the ancient shinobi. You will return to the world above. You will infiltrate Konoha, Madara ordered. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Infiltrate. Why not destroy it? Because destruction without purpose is waste, Madara replied, a cruel smirk touching his lips. The Leaf Village holds secrets. They hold the legacy of your father, the fourth Hokage. They hold the Uchiha clan, who are currently rotting from their own internal politics. Go there. Watch them. Let them see the hero they abandoned return as a stranger. Become a ninja of the leaf, rise through their ranks, and when the time is right, tear the village down from its foundations. Madara reached up, his trembling, withered hand touching Naruto's forehead. A massive, dense surge of dark spiritual energy flowed from Madara into Naruto's subconscious, the blueprint of the infinite Tsukuyomi, forbidden Uchiha Jutsu secrets, and the direct mental trigger to command the White Zetsu army when the time came. Take my gunbai. Hide your true strength. Let them see only what you allow them to see. Madara's voice grew fainter, his eye finally closing. Go, Naruto. Show this world what happens when the dark is allowed to grow. With a final, deep breath, the chest of the legendary Madara Uchiha fell still. The thick tubes connecting him to the Gedo Mazo withered and turned to dust. Naruto stood up slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't mourn. Madara had taught him that death was merely a transition of power. He strapped the massive gunbai to his back, sealing it into a scroll he hid beneath his dark robes. Goodbye, Sensei, Naruto whispered. Turning his back on the cave that had been his home and his hell for 11 years, Naruto walked toward the surface, ready to face the light of a world he had been raised to conquer. The gates of Konoha. A few weeks later, the reinforced wooden gates of Konoha stood tall under the midday sun. Two Chunin guards, Azumo and Katetsu, were lazily checking paperwork when a sudden, suffocating shift in the air made them freeze. Walking down the dusty road toward the gate was a lone boy. He wore a dark, high-collared cloak that blocked the wind, and a travel hood covered his face. But what caught their attention was his stride, completely silent, devoid of any openings, a textbook-perfect assassin's posture. Hold it right there, kid, Katetsu called out, gripping his kunai, his instinct screaming that something was deeply wrong. State your name and business in the leaf. The boy stopped a few feet away. Slowly, he reached up and pulled back his hood, revealing sun-kissed blonde hair, sharp, crystalline, blue eyes, and 3 distinct whisker marks on each cheek. Azumo gasped, his paperwork slipping from his hands. No. It can't be. They had seen the missing child posters 11 years ago. The village elders and the third Hokage had searched the entire land of fire for months before assuming the Jinchuriki had been killed or eaten by wild beasts. Naruto looked at the giant green gates, then at the trembling guards. A cold, polite, and completely hollow smile formed on his lips. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, the boy said, his voice calm, chillingly polite, and devoid of any childhood warmth. I've come home. The cold welcome. The Hokage's office was suffocatingly quiet. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, sat behind his desk, puffing heavily on his pipe, his aged eyes fixed intently on the 11-year-old boy standing before him. Beside Hiruzen stood Danzo Shimura, his cane clicking against the floor, his single visible eye gleaming with cold calculation. Naruto stood perfectly still in the center of the room. He wore standard, simple civilian clothes provided by the village, a plain black shirt and pants, having sealed his AR. Moored robes and Madara's gunbai safely away in a storage scroll hidden beneath his sleeve. He kept his posture relaxed, his hands loosely by his sides, presenting himself as a blank slate. 11 years, Naruto, Hiruzen spoke, his voice heavy with a mixture of guilt and suspicion. Where have you been? Who raised you? Naruto looked directly into the Hokage's eyes, offering a carefully crafted lie that Madara had prepared for him. I don't know who he was, Lord Hokage. An old man found me crying in the woods when I was a baby. He lived deep in the mountains, away from people. He taught me how to survive, how to hunt, and basic chakra control. A few weeks ago, he passed away from old age. Before he died, he told me my name, and told me I belong to the leaf. Quote. Danzo took a step forward, his voice a harsh rasp. A convenient story. And you expect us to believe an ordinary hermit could slip past our Anbu borders and raise a Jinchuriki without noticing what you carry? Quote. Naruto didn't flinch at the word Jinchuriki. He simply tilted his head, acting slightly naive yet grounded. He wasn't ordinary. He was strict. But he never spoke of a village, and he never spoke of a fox. I only learned about the beast inside me when it tried to kill me during training, and I had to force it to submit. Force it to submit. The casual phrasing sent a chill through both older men. Hiruzen exchanged a wary glance with Danzo. They had already had the Yamanaka clan mind walkers attempt a passive surface scan on Naruto upon his arrival. To their shock, Naruto's mindscape was a fortress, completely dark, cold, and utterly impenetrable. It didn't feel like a child's mind. It felt like a void. We will verify your story in due time, Danzo said coldly, looking at Hiruzen. Hiruzen, a weapon of this caliber cannot be left to wander freely. Place him in the root. I will personally oversee his integration. No, Danzo, Hiruzen countered firmly, narrowing his eyes. He is Minato's son. He will live in the village, under my supervision. He will join the Ninja Academy's graduating class. Let him interact with peers his own age. Let him find the will of fire. Inside his mind, Naruto smiled a dark, mocking smile. The will of fire. What a pathetic illusion. As you wish, Lord Hokage, Naruto said aloud, bowing politely. I only wish to serve the village that my father died protecting. The predator in the classroom. The next morning, the Ninja Academy was abuzz with whispers. I heard he's a freak. He was missing for 11 years. Quote. Look at his face. Those whiskers look dangerous. Iruka Yumino stood at the front of the classroom, tapping his clipboard nervously. He had been briefed by the Hokage about Naruto's true identity, but looking at the boy, Iruka felt an inexplicable instinct to step back. The boy didn't walk like an academy student. He moved with absolute, silent efficiency. Class, we have a late addition to the graduating roster, Iruka announced, trying to force a warm smile. This is Naruto Uzumaki. Please treat him with respect. Naruto read the room in a fraction of a second. He recognized the heirs to the prominent clans. The lazy Nara, the loud Inuzuka, the quiet Hyuga girl who immediately blushed and looked away. And in the back row, sitting alone with his arms crossed, was Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke's eyes were locked onto Naruto. As an Uchiha, Sasuke possessed an innate sensitivity to intense chakra signatures. The moment Naruto entered the room, Sasuke felt a heavy, suffocating pressure drop over his chest. It was faint, deliberately suppressed, but it was there. A dark, ancient weight. Naruto, you can take the empty seat next to Sasuke, Iruka said. Naruto walked up the stairs, his eyes meeting Sasuke's. Naruto did not glare. He did not smirk. He simply gave Sasuke a cold, assessing look, as if evaluating a piece of property. He sat down without saying a word. Hey, Sasuke muttered under his breath, his pride pricked by Naruto's indifference. Where did you come from? You don't look like you belong here. I belong wherever I choose to stand, Naruto replied smoothly, his voice low enough that only Sasuke could hear. Focus on the lesson, Uchiha. Your stance has too many openings. Sasuke's eyes widened, his teeth gritting in sudden anger. How does he know my clan? And how dare he critique me? The combat trial. To gauge Naruto's placement for the upcoming Genin graduation, Iruka led the class out to the training field for taijutsu sparring TCHES. Alright. First match, Iruka called out, looking at his clipboard. Hiba Inuzuka vs Naruto Uzumaki. Hiba grinned widely, cracking his knuckles as he stepped into the ring with Akamaru barking from his hood. Hey, a kid who lived in the woods. This is gonna be a piece of cake. Don't cry when I mess up that pretty face, wild boy. Naruto walked into the circle, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. He didn't take a stance. He just stood there, his blue eyes empty. Take a stance, Naruto. Iruka warned. This is my stance, Naruto replied calmly. Infuriated by the blatant disrespect, Hiba lunged forward. You're asking for it. Passing Fang. Hiba dropped to all fours, spinning like a wild beast, driving a rapid combination of claws and kicks toward Naruto's head. To the shock of the entire class, Naruto didn't move his arms. He simply shifted his weight. Left, right, tilt. With mere millimeter-precise micro-movements, Naruto dodged every single strike from Hiba without his hands ever leaving his pockets. His speed wasn't flash-step fast. It was just perfectly efficient. He was reading Kiba's muscle twitches before Kiba even threw the punches, a basic combat prediction skill Madara had beaten into him through years of blindfolded training. Stand still. Kiba roared, throwing a desperate, wide right hook. Naruto finally took his right hand out of his pocket. In a blur that no student could follow, he caught Kiba's wrist. The momentum of Kiba's attack completely died. Naruto's grip felt like an iron vice. Your anger makes your movements heavy, and your balance is entirely centered on your forward leg, Naruto whispered coldly. Before Kiba could process the words, Naruto swept Kiba's standing leg, twisted his wrist, and slammed him face first into the dirt with brutal force. The wind was violently knocked out of Kiba's lungs, and he lay there, groaning in pain. The playground went dead silent. Naruto stood over him, completely unbothered, wiping a speck of dust off his shirt. He looked up at Iruka. As the match over, Iruka swallowed hard, stammering, winner. Naruto Uzumaki. In the crowd, Sasuke's hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a profound, burning frustration. He had spent his entire life trying to be the best, carrying the weight of the slaughtered Uchiha clan on his shoulders, yet this blonde stranger had just casually dismantled a clan heir without even trying. As Naruto walked back toward the sidelines, his eyes briefly met a shadow in the distant trees. Two Anbu operatives and a man with a cyclops mask and a tilted forehead protector, Kakashi Hatake, were watching from the branches. Naruto knew they were there. He had felt their chakra signatures the moment they arrived. Watch all you want, hounds of Konoha, Naruto thought, a dark, hidden malice swirling within his ocean of blue chakra. You are only seeing the puppet. You have no idea who holds the strings. The sound of Chidori and the roar of the fan. The Genin graduation exams were a mere formality for Naruto. While the other students struggled with basic clone jutsu, Naruto had effortlessly produced a solid, physical clone de. T left Iruka speechless. When the teams were announced, the higher-ups made their strategic move. Team 7 was formed, consisting of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki, under the leadership of the elite Jonin, Kakashi Hatake. It was a team built on a knife's edge, the last Uchiha paired with the long-lost Jinchuriki. Weeks passed, filled with mundane D-rank missions that bored Sasuke to no end but served as a perfect cover for Naruto to observe the inner workings of the village. He watched how the villagers still looked at him with lingering, fearful eyes, unaware that the boy they feared was no longer an innocent victim, but a weapon waiting to detonate. The true test came during their first real deployment, the Wave mission. The assignment had spiraled out of control. What was supposed to be a simple C-rank escort mission had turned into an A-rank war zone. At the unfinished Great Naruto Bridge, wrapped in a thick, unnatural fog, Team 7 found themselves trapped in a deadly game of survival against Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist, and his masked apprentice, Haku. The Ice Mirror Trap, Haijutsu, Makio Hyosho, Secret Jutsu, Crystal Ice Mirrors. Haku's voice echoed through the mist as a massive dome of ice mirrors erupted around Sasuke and Naruto. Within seconds, Haku's reflection appeared in every single mirror, throwing a relentless hail of Senbon needles from all angles. Sasuke was bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts. His two-tomo Sharingan spun frantically, trying to track Haku's blinding speed, but he was reaching his limit. Damn it! He's too fast. Sasuke spat, coughing up a bit of blood as he collapsed to one knee. He looked over at Naruto, expecting panic. Instead, Naruto stood perfectly still in the center of the dome. His hands were tucked inside his sleeves. His breathing was slow, deep, and rhythmic. Not a single Senbon had pierced a vital spot. He had deflected the lethal ones with the casual flick of a kunai, letting the minor ones graze him just to maintain his cover. You are wasting your energy, Uchiha, Naruto said, his voice entirely flat. You are trying to see him with your eyes. Feel his displacement of air. Feel his chakra signature as it jumps between mirrors. Quote, shut up. I don't need your lectures. Sasuke roared. Driven by sheer desperation and the ancestral pride of his clan, Sasuke forced his chakra to his right hand. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The violent, deafening sound of 1,000 birds filling the air erupted from Sasuke's palm. Bright, erratic blue lightning sparked violently around his arm, cracks forming in the ground beneath his feet. I'll rip through these mirrors myself. Sasuke yelled, his face contorted in agony and determination. Chidori. Sasuke lunged forward, charging blindly at one of the mirrors. But Haku was a master assassin. Recognizing the lethal nature of the attack, Haku accelerated, appearing directly in Sasuke's blind spot with a fistful of needles aimed at the boy's neck. It's over, Haku whispered. Unveiling the ghost. Boom. Before Haku's needles could pierce Sasuke, a sudden, suffocating wave of pure, unadulterated malice exploded from Naruto. The ice mirrors cracked under the sheer weight of the chakra pressure. Sasuke's Chidori sputtered and died out as he fell to the ground, paralyzed by an instinctual, primal terror. Naruto's eyes had changed. They weren't the red of the Kyuubi. They were a cold, piercing blue, but his pupil had narrowed into a razor-sharp slit. I have played the part of a helpless genin long enough, Naruto murmured, his voice sending a chill down Haku's spine. Naruto unsealed a heavy, canvas-wrapped object from the scroll beneath his sleeve. With a sharp rip, the fabric tore away, revealing the legendary gunbai, the massive, dual-bladed war fan of Madara Uchiha. Haku froze, his instincts screaming at him to flee. What is that weapon? Why does a child possess a presence like a demon god? Desperate, Haku threw a massive wave of Senbon needles directly at Naruto's chest. Naruto didn't dodge. He simply raised the heavy gunbai, holding it firmly with one hand. Uchiha Geishi, Uchiha reflection. Naruto intoned coldly. The moment the Senbon hit the sacred wood of the fan, the weapon glowed with a faint, ominous blue chakra. The kinetic energy and elemental force of Haku's attack were completely absorbed into the fan. With a swift, powerful twist of his torso, Naruto swung the gunbai forward, releasing the stored energy in a catastrophic shockwave. Boom! A violent blast of wind and kinetic force exploded from the fan, shattering all 20 ice mirrors into a million glittering shards. The concussive blast caught Haku dead on, snapping his ribs and sending him crashing violently across the bridge, coughing up blood. The thick mist completely cleared, torn apart by the sheer force of the technique. The repercussions. On the other side of the bridge, Kakashi Hatake, who had been locked in a fierce battle with Zabuza, completely froze. His lone Sharingan widened to its absolute limit as he looked past Zabuza toward Team 7. The ice mirrors were gone. Haku was defeated, unconscious on the shattered concrete. And standing in the center of the destruction was Naruto, casually resting a giant, iconic war fan on his shoulder. Kakashi's breath caught in his throat. He had fought in the Third Shinobi World War. He knew the history of his village. He recognized that fan. Madara's gunbai. No, that's impossible. It's a myth. Kakashi's mind raced in utter horror. Who taught him that? Where did he get that weapon? Sasuke, still on the ground, looked up at Naruto with wide, trembling eyes. The Chidori he had worked so hard to learn felt like a children's toy compared to the casual, devastating power Naruto had just displayed. What? What are you? Sasuke whispered, his voice cracking. Naruto didn't look back at him. He sealed the gunbai back into his scroll with a seamless, rhythmic hand sign, his blue eyes returning to their normal, deceptive calm. I am the reality this village tried to bury, Naruto said softly, looking out over the ocean. And the storm is just beginning. The grand finale. The awakening of the eclipse. The aftermath of the wave mission left Konoha's higher-ups in a state of absolute panic. Kakashi's confidential report regarding Naruto's possession of Madara's gunbai and his terrifyingly refined combat prowess had sent shockwaves through the Hokage Council. Yet, before they could formally detain or isolate Naruto, the Chunin exams arrived, bringing a massive influx of foreign shinobi ND forcing Konoha to keep its ultimate weapon on display to maintain a facade of control. Naruto played along perfectly. He moved through the forest of death like a ghost, quietly dismantling any team that crossed his path, all while feeding information to the white Zetsu clones lurking beneath the earth. He knew Orochimaru was slithering in the shadows, planning a strike. He knew the Sand Village was preparing an invasion. Everything was falling exactly into place, just as Madara had predicted. The structural foundation of Hashirama's peace was rotting, and Naruto was ready to pull the trig. The arena of judgment. The finals of the Chunin exams took place in a colossal, crowded arena packed with feudal lords, villagers, and shinobi from every land. The atmosphere was electric. The final match of the tournament was announced. Sasuke Uchiha vs. Naruto Uzumaki. As the crowd roared, the two boys stepped onto the dirt field. Sasuke walked out with an intense, burning determination. He had spent the last month training relentlessly with Kakashi, mastering his Sharingan and pushing his body to its absolute limits just to stand on equal footing with Naruto. Naruto stepped out with his usual, chilling serenity. He wore no armor, no heavy scrolls, just a dark, high-collared jacket. His blue eyes were perfectly still. I don't care who raised you, or what kind of freakish power you have, Sasuke snarled, his two-tomo Sharingan spinning violent. TLY. I am an Uchiha. I am the avenger of my clan. I will break that empty look right off your face. Naruto didn't answer. He simply gestured with one hand, inviting Sasuke to strike. Chidori. Sasuke screamed. The deafening chirp of 1,000 birds erupted around Sasuke's hand as he charged forward at a speed that left a trail of dust behind him. It was a flawless, lightning-fast strike aimed directly at Naruto's chest. Naruto didn't pull out the gunbai. He didn't blink. As Sasuke reached him, Naruto simply slid his right foot back, twisted his torso by a fraction of an inch, and let the Chidori pass harmlessly under his arm. Before Sasuke could recover his momentum, Naruto placed a single hand on Sasuke's chest. Shinra Tensei Almighty Push. It wasn't a true Rinnegan technique. Naruto didn't possess the eyes, but by combining the Kyuubi's raw kinetic chakra with a forbidden Uchiha pulse transmission technique Madara Ha D engraved into his soul, Naruto released a localized, invisible shockwave. Boom. Sasuke was blasted backward across the arena, his body tumbling through the dirt before crashing violently into the stone wall. The entire stadium gasped. It had taken a single second. The fall of the leaf. Before the proctor could call the match, feathers began to drift down from the sky. A massive mass hypnosis genjutsu fell over the stadium, putting the civilian spectators to sleep. Boom. 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 Giant, multi-headed snakes crashed through the outer walls of Konoha. Orochimaru's invasion, combined with the hidden sand, had officially begun. In the cage box, the disguised Orochimaru took the third Hokage hostage, sealing them inside a purple flame barrier. The arena erupted into absolute chaos. Cloud and Sand Shinobi clashed with Konoha Anbu. Amidst the screaming and the blood, Naruto stood in the center of the arena, entirely unbothered. He looked up at the Hokage box, watching the barrier flare to life. Kakashi and Guy dropped down into the arena, landing right in front of Naruto, their weapons drawn. Kakashi's face was pale with a mixture of exhaustion and terror. Naruto. We need to evacuate you right now. The village is under attack, and you are the primary target. Kakashi yelled, his Sharingan darting around the battlefield. Naruto slowly turned to look at his sensei. For the first time since arriving in Konoha, a dark, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile that perfectly mirrored the terrifying, malicious grin of Madara Uchiha. You still don't understand, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto spoke, his voice carrying an eerie, echo-like depth that resonated through the chaos. I am not the target of this invasion. Quote. Naruto clapped his hands together in a single, heavy hand sign. I am the architect. The roar of the ghost. The earth beneath the stadium began to violently crack and rupture. Pale, twisted roots from the Gedo Mazo's remnant energy, channeled through Naruto's Uzumaki chakra, burst from the ground. Hundreds of white Zetsu clones began to swarm into the arena, not attacking the invaders, but ruthlessly slaughtering the Konoha shinobi. Kakashi's heart plummeted into absolute despair. No. Naruto. Why? Hashirama's dream was a failure built on the bodies of children and the betrayal of the Uchiha, Naruto stated coldly, his blue eyes suddenly shifting. The deep, dark sea of his chakra flared outward, enveloping him in a towering, translucent skeletal ribcage of dark blue energy, the Inidia. El manifestation of Susanoo, fueled by the immense spiritual imprint Madara had left inside him. The sky above Konoha darkened, as if an eclipse had blocked out the afternoon sun. Naruto reached behind his back, unsealing the massive gunbai and swinging it forcefully into the air. The shockwave blew away a dozen enemy shinobi instantly. Sasuke, crawling out of the rubble, looked at the towering demonic armor surrounding Naruto, his mind completely shattering. That's the ultimate Uchiha power. How do you have it? Naruto looked down at the bleeding Uchiha heir, then at the burning village of Konoha. The fires reflected in his cold, slit-pupil eyes. Madara Uchiha sends his regards, Naruto whispered. With a final, devastating swing of the gunbai, Naruto leveled the entire eastern wall of the stadium. Turning his back on his horrified team and the dying village, Naruto walked into the smoke, flanked by a vanguard of thousands of Zetsu clones. Part 1 of the grand plan was complete. Konoha was broken, its secrets were exposed, and the world would soon remember the absolute terror of the name Uchiha. End of Part 1.